is finished. So as I said, welcome. I am joined tonight by a number of my colleagues, Dr. Burton, who's our lead teacher of teaching and learning, Dr. Linton, who is our assistant head director of studies, Mrs. Smith, who is in charge of the individual side for years 7 to 10, and Mr. Allison, who is obviously the head of year 10. So we've got lots of experience with us tonight, and we're going to break down the evening into a number of different sections over the next 25 to 30 minutes. As always, if you've got any questions, please do put them in the chat bar, and when we get to the end, I will then delegate the questions out to my colleagues, the most appropriate ones, so we can ensure that we can answer all your questions over the course of the night. So just to start, a little bit of an overview around what we're going to be talking about. Not a lot from me tonight. Once I hand over to my colleagues, we are going to cover what success looks like over the next 2 years. Obviously, a really important time in your son and daughter's school career. What the curriculum looks like, I'm going to hand that over to Dr. Linton, who's going to talk about reports as well. And study skills and student habits at home, over to Dr. Burton, and then how we can best support you over to Mrs. Smith and Mr. Allison. I am recording the session, yes. So just a little bit from me. I think it would be wrong of me not to talk about success. We are talking about Key Stage 4. So just a little bit of a highlight. Those of you that haven't seen these statistics so far, obviously we had phenomenal GCSE results last year. You can see the general trend of GCSE results is on the up, and that tends to, we're hoping that that will continue. Clearly, there's going to be a bit of a plateau. Those numbers can't continue to go up forever. That's just the norm, but we're incredibly proud of our A star and 8 statistic, and obviously our 7, 8 and 9 statistic. And those statistics this year, you may or may not be aware, put us 32nd nationally and one of the top schools north of Oxford in the whole country. So we're incredibly proud of that. And my message there is really that your sons and daughters are also capable of this. The statistics that we have, the data that we hold on every year group suggests that they are certainly on track to achieve in 2 years' time a good set of GCSE results. But with that, just one message, and this message comes from myself, but also some of it came from our assistant head year 11 to 13, Mr. Gillett, who said a few of these words at the start of his assembly last year. And this message is incredibly true. Don't be complacent. Be successful. You must have a goal. That's absolutely true. And a number of us will talk about that across the evening tonight. Know where you want to go and what you want to achieve is really important. Let your heart drive ambition. That's key. But your head must help you get there. Don't hang everything on a single target. We see that far too often. But take control of the process. The process is incredibly important. There's been a process so far to the end of year 9. We're now starting a new process as we head into years 10 and 11. And certainly I'm sure Dr. Burton will talk about processes in his part later on. But don't forget, we're here to enjoy everything that we do, but we will make mistakes, but we will learn from them as we progress through the 2 years. And if we don't learn from our mistakes, we're not going to make that progress as part of the process. So I think that's enough from me tonight. I am going to hand over now to Dr. Linton. I'm hoping that she's about to appear on your screens, and she's going to talk to you about some academic information. So over to you, Dr. Linton.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm sure Mr. Spedding will let me know if you can't. Thank you. So I'm going to give you some of the academic information that will be really useful in helping you support your sons and daughters in their progress with their GCSEs. So as you know, in year 10, students start studying for their 9 or 10 GCSE subjects, a number of which they have chosen, and some of them that all students in the school study. The key information I want to give you now is about how you will get information about progress of your sons and daughters and how that will come in terms of reporting. So just like in year 7 to 9, every half term, there will be an interim grade awarded for your son or daughter. And as exactly the same way as in year 7, 8 and 9, there is an effort grade. So that will be either below meeting expectations or exceeding expectations for your son or daughter. So for every individual, that grade will be awarded. Should the effort level be below expectations, or if there is something particular that needs to be mentioned, there will be an additional comment that comes with that. So for example, perhaps some homework hadn't been handed in on time 2 or 3 times. So your son or daughter should be given a ticket to let you know that that's happened, but also in the interim grade, you might see that the effort is below and that comment will come along with it. And so that will be a clear guide for what your son or daughter should work on in the next half term. So that's effort, which is as you have always known it. What changes a little bit is the attainment grades that your sons and daughters will get in Key Stage 4. So in all of their subjects, grades will be awarded in line with the grades that they will get at the end of their GCSE course, which for every subject is grade 9 to 1, except for, I'm going to say English language, I think is the A star to E. I always get mixed up. Yes, thank you, Mr. Spedding. English language is A star to E. English literature is 9 to 1. All of those subjects, therefore, in your interim grade, you will get a grade 9 to 1 or an A star to E, which will tell you what level your son or daughter is working at that time for the current grade. And it's really important to understand that the current performance of your son and daughter will vary for different subjects. So at the start of year 10, in some subjects, it will not be possible for your son or daughter to be awarded a grade 9, simply because that level of content is not taught immediately. So for example, the kind of classic subjects where that would be the case would be in maths and in modern foreign languages. Those subjects are where the skills kind of build out over time rather than in discrete topics. So it would be really difficult to award a student a grade 9 in maths in the first half term, simply because the complexity of work will not have been encountered in lessons. Whereas in chemistry, for example, my subject, topics are discrete largely. Some have links between each other, but in a single topic, a student would be able to encounter questions of the highest level, and therefore it might be possible to get a grade 9. So when you get that first set of interim grades, please don't be shocked if your son or daughter achieves a grade that maybe isn't the 8 or 9 that they are aspiring for at the end of the course. That's where the projected grade comes in. So along with the current grade, students will also be awarded a projected grade. That grade is the grade that their teacher feels they are on track to achieve if they maintain the current levels of effort and work in that subject. So the trajectory, the flight path that they are on to achieve. So it would be usual, for example, perhaps to see maybe a current grade of a grade 6, but possibly a projection of a grade 8 or a 9, suggesting that that student is on track to reach that by the end of the course. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples to kind of illustrate that, and to also show that all of our students are different and they are on different paths, different trajectories throughout their GCSE journey. And as Mr. Spedding has shown you, all of our students do really, really well at GCSE, and they end up with a really good set of grades at the end if they continue to work hard, put in the effort. It just might be that they take a different route to get there. So there's a lot of information on this slide, but if I could just draw your attention to kind of the table in the top left, you can see the autumn 1 interim grades. The first number is the current grade and the second number is the projected grade. For this student, you can see they've got some 4s, 5s and 6s as their current grades, and their projections are a bit higher in most cases with some 6s and 7s in there. But what we can see is as that student progresses through year 10, and then on the right-hand side is a table from year 11, you can see that the current grades are going up, but also the projections are going up. So a student like this may have perhaps started with a kind of a more slow kind of progress in year 10, but has worked really well into year 11. And you can see that their projections are getting really, really strong for the end of their GCSE. At the bottom of this slide, you can see this student got some grades in their year 11 mocks, the kind of 6s and 7s and A* in there as well, with an average point score of 6.4. But they made fantastic progress between their mock results and their GCSEs, getting an average point score of 8.1 with some excellent grades, 8s, 9s, and only 1 7, a fantastic set. So you can see this student has had a really strong level of progress throughout the GCSEs and has ended up with a really good set of results. And if your sons and daughters, put the effort in, follow the advice of the teachers, then absolutely their profile could look like this by the end of their GCSEs. On the next slide, we've got just another example for another student. You can see that this student, the year 10 grades on the left-hand side, you can see are really, really strong at the beginning. In fact, they've got some 8s and 6s and 7s with strong projections. That's in the autumn 2 interim grades. So they've had time to get to that more challenging work. And then spring 1, which is taken from year 11 on the right-hand side, you can see that almost all of their grades are 8s and 9s with projections of 8s and 9s. Now, this is a really high attaining student, and you can see that they've made a fantastic start to year 10. They've got a little bit less far to go into year 11, but ultimately you can see their GCSE results, an average of 8.8, which is close to the student on the previous slide, but they've just had kind of a different trajectory throughout their GCSEs. So I was just trying to illustrate that all students have a different path, and the interim grades will help to give you a snapshot, show you the journey that they're on. And if you've got any queries about them at any time, please contact your son or daughter's tutor, who will be happy to give you some more information and background on this. So those are interim grades. The next thing I wanted to talk to you a little bit about was the kind of overall assessment schedule for year 10 and 11 throughout their GCSEs. So when are they going to have chances to really practice significant assessments and get a really good snapshot of their overall progress? So throughout the entire GCSE course, all subjects will periodically do in-class assessments. So topic tests, shorter assessments, low stakes quizzes, practicing previous work. That will be going on throughout, spread kind of throughout the entire course. At the end of year 10, we have a larger assessment where all of the students will not be in lessons in a similar way to exam week for year 7, 8 and 9. And students will, at the end of year 10, have a chance to be assessed on all of the work that they've done so far in the course. And that will be after the Easter break in year 10. So then, to give students a good opportunity to make some good progress before their next big set of assessments, we wait until after the October half term in year 11 for the students to have their mock exams. Some schools, you may know, do mock exams in January. We have found moving the mock exams a little bit earlier is really, really successful for our students because it gives them a really good opportunity to reflect on the progress that they've made to date and to work on those areas that they need to, and to make that progress between their mock exams and their final GCSE exams in the summer. We're not expecting students to be the finished product in the year 11 mock exams. We see that most students make between 1 and 2 grades progress between those mock exams and the summer exams. And so it's a really good opportunity to see where the work needs to go. And the last, Mr. Spedding, you've gone on too fast. I was just going to mention the year 11 progress tests on the previous slide. Before students go away for their exam leave, we are also do a shorter assessment, but just to give students a final chance to be assessed on some of that final work that was covered after the mock exams were completed. So that will happen probably in March of year 11. So looking even further ahead, it's really important just to highlight our requirements for sixth form entry. The vast majority of our students will easily cross this hurdle. It's just important to highlight it now that for sixth form entry, we require an average of grade 6 across the exams taken. And so you can take the numeric grade for all of those subjects and take an average, and the English language grade that is A star to E, we can convert that into a number and get an average there. So in order to study a subject at A level, we also ask for students to have a minimum of a grade 7 in the subjects that they take at A level. There are sometimes cases where there is some discretion taken by the school. So for example, occasionally a student might be 1 mark away from the grade boundary above, and so we've allowed them to study that subject. In all of those cases, we will speak with the family and look at that. For example, if a student was ill during their GCSEs, that might have had an adverse effect on a particular subject. Some subjects are not studied at GCSE, and so there are other prerequisites for them. You don't need to remember this information. There will be an options booklet that comprehensively explains all of this. But for example, with PE and psychology, they require a good background in biology. So we ask for a grade 7 at GCSE in biology for those subjects. And economics requires a good background in maths. And so we look at a grade 7 in maths there. But as I've said, all of this will be published in the A-level option booklet, and we will send through this year's A-level option booklet just for you to look ahead if you wish to see what subjects there are available. But those decisions absolutely do not need to be made yet. That is for the middle of year 11, so you don't need to make those decisions just yet. That is all of the information from me, but if you have any questions at all, please pop them into the chat, and then I'm going to pass over to Ben Burton now to talk a little bit about study habits in year 10 and 11. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Linton. I hope you can hear me, everybody. I'm going to be spending a little bit of time this evening just talking about some suggestions for study habits, particularly habits at home, and some suggestions into sort of how students can help to better organise their time and their approach to revision and classwork at home. We're also with some suggestions for how you as parents can perhaps have those helpful conversations in helping students make that transition to GCSE study. We try to avoid using sort of language around good or bad habits for study, but encouraging students to think about what we might call adaptive habits that will help them make that transition to GCSE level. And when discussing study habits, we really try and focus on 3 different strategies, which are also ideas you can use at home. The first of these I would call schemes. If we just hold on a minute on the slide for Mr. Spedding. It's easier to develop new habits if these are associated with a specific time and place. For example, associating study with being in the library or with being in an office or a working space at home. Getting used to thinking in the terms of this is what I do here and this is what I do now is a really important strategy for reinforcing effective study at school and home. It's also really good for students' well-being, and I'll come back to the sort of reasoning behind that later. Another way of reinforcing positive habits is a bit of if-then planning that you can encourage your sons and daughters to go through. And that provides further reinforcement for developing study habits. For example, if it's 4:15 on a Thursday, then I'll go along to this clinic after school. Or if I'm having difficulty planning an essay, then I can contact my teacher or my tutor. Another kind of conversation and planning that you might want to have with your sons and daughters at home that can help them reinforce those good habits is some first and then planning. So first I'll finish my essay, then I can see my friends. This dovetails with what's called the PREMAC principle of reinforcement, the idea that we can encourage that idea of doing work and then setting a reward as something that will happen after it. We know that students can find it hard as they progress to GCSE to cope with sort of the increasing demands of workload. But practicing that idea of working solidly for a particular period of time and then taking a break, using the idea of first our work, then our rest, helps to establish a habit that we can then grow and build as year 10 progresses. The longer then they can build their stamina and their endurance when it comes to working on tasks such as homework, which I'll come back to later. Next slide, please. A lot of the thinking around the way that GCSE courses are structured and the way in which we encourage students to think about their homework relates back to this concept on the slide here, Ebbinghaus's curve of forgetting. I always think it's ironic that we're bombarding you with information just as I'm about to tell you how quickly you forget the things that we teach you. But this slide here really shows just how quickly memory decays after we encounter it for the first time. And as you can see from those different shades of blue and green on the curves there, we can see that memory decay can help to be acted against if we revisit and review material. I think if there's one really key principle to take away from tonight and be able to discuss with your sons and daughters, is that review helps your recall. That's a really key way in which different departments in the school structure their teaching. We use principles that are called spacing and interleaving, where we go back over concepts at intervals of time. The idea being that revisiting really helps to strengthen students' ability to store and retrieve information. But we'll also be encouraging your sons and daughters to get into those habits of regular review as they go through the year. That will include revising for tests which are structured to enable them to revisit material. But it's also a good habit each day or each week to build in time to review what's been covered in the previous days, to help really consolidate that material, but also to identify areas that might be causing a bit of worry or uncertainty, that enable your sons and daughters to then act on that, seek out support so that they can consolidate anything that they're not sure about. Next slide, please. I want to say a little bit with that in mind about note-taking methods. And as students move further through the school and as the amount of content that they're learning and being assessed on increases, it's a good time, I think, to take stock of some note-taking methods and find ways which may be effective for you as the demand increases. We don't prescribe a format for note-taking at school, but there are some key principles, I think, to bear in mind that can make reviewing your work more easy and more effective. The first thing I think to say is that getting into good habits of note-taking starts in the classroom. And I'd really, we will be encouraging as well your sons and daughters to have a system. That can be things like using headings, subheadings, highlighters, different colors, so that the information is organized and visually coded. What I mean by visually coded is making sure that information is associated with a particular color or a particular area on the page. The more methods that are used to arrange information and organize it in notes, like on the image you can see here, the stronger the memory storage is. This draws on a principle called dual coding. The brain finds it easier to remember things it can associate with a particular space on the page, as well as a particular color or a particular set of illustrations as well. And it will make subsequent revision much simpler too. Another example that your sons and daughters might want to consider is the Cornell note-taking method. It builds on this idea and formalizes it slightly by arranging the page into different sections, those that are used for taking notes, those that are used for writing an overall summary, as well as a space that can be used for sort of asking yourself questions or reflecting on questions that have arisen from the material that you can follow up later on with staff or with your tutor for further support. So as we've seen, I think that regular review is really critical for reshaping the curve of forgetting and ensuring that we store information as securely as possible. We will all incorporate review into our lessons as well as in the curriculum at home. But your sons and daughters can really strengthen that by making time for that ongoing revision from as early in the course as they can. Regular review should also be active. And one of the key principles of that is summarizing. So that means progressively whittling down your notes to the most essential principles of each review. That might be going from a page of a textbook, working down to a mind map, and perhaps then working down to a cue card with just a few bullet points on it. The more that we're distilling information into its key principles, the more those act as little triggers for the brain to help retrieve the information when it's needed during the revision and assessment phases. The number you can see up here of 90 minutes is relating to how we think about homework as we move up to Key Stage 4. For students in Year 10, each subject will set homework that's designed to take no longer than 45 minutes. And that homework is timetabled by Dr. Linton so that no more than 2 subjects are set on a given day. And students should usually get at least 3 or 4 days to complete that. And the details of any homework will be posted on your sons and daughters' Google Classroom. All this should mean that students have no more than 90 minutes of homework in a given evening. That's still an increase, of course, from Year 9, and it reflects, I think, the greater depth and demands of study at Key Stage 4. We find that students are more likely to manage that transition if they get into good habits early, such as starting work as soon after it's set, so that there's time to seek help and support before a deadline if it's needed, for example. It's not unusual for students to take slightly longer to complete tasks at the start of the academic year as they adjust to the transition that they're going through. However, if you do have any concerns that your son or daughter is spending much longer than 45 minutes on a piece of homework, then please do contact their tutor in the first instance. And that feedback allows us to build a bit of a picture up about them as an individual and assess if any kind of support might be useful to help them in managing their homework and workload. Next slide, please. I also want to talk a little bit about how students structure their revision time. We know, particularly as we go on to GCSE and as testing becomes an increasingly familiar part of the course, that students need to get used to how they make revision particularly effective for them. And a good thing to think about is the clock method here. There's a summary on the bullet points here, but a key idea to take away is that it's not simply a question of how long we revise for, but how that time is used. And there are several key skills that students should be trying to build into their revision time now, especially as they move through Year 10 and Year 11. A key principle here is that about a quarter of time spent revision should be used to review notes and go back over material. It's often assumed, I think, by students that this is the primary task of revision, but reviewing material is actually only the preliminary stage. What's critical is what comes after that, and this is often what can take at least half the time that we spend revising, and that is practice, a more active phase of revision. When we're really involved in retrieving and applying our knowledge in new situations through assessing and testing ourselves. And that's important for 2 main reasons. One is it builds in some exam practice, and that gives students a measure of performance, how much we know, how well we can apply it in different situations. But it's also important for what's known as retrieval practice. The more we're involved in having to go back into our memory and access information, the more we're strengthening our working memory, building against that kind of memory decay that I talked about earlier, and making sure that we're easily able to access material as and when we need it. The final quarter of revision time is best spent checking over then the kind of assessment or self-assessment that's taking place. And that completes a feedback loop for revision. It gives your sons and daughters a chance to check their work, go back over areas of difficulty, and use that to figure out further areas for their review and revision subsequently. Yeah, next slide, please. Building on from that, and I think in some ways underlining a lot of what I've been saying so far about effective study habits is having a conversation with your sons and daughters about study environment. Over the last 3 years at school, your sons and daughters will have got into habits about where and how they study at home. But as we make a transition to GCSE, it's often a good time to pause and reflect on how things are being done and whether any changes might be made that would benefit them. We know that organisation is really important to studying effectively at home. If there's no space, or if books are hard to reach in the space that students are in, it becomes very difficult to study effectively. And students need the same approach to study and clear their areas so that there's no barriers or blocks to kind of their effective working. Building what I was saying earlier about habits being related to schemes, it's particularly helpful if students can identify a specific place at home that they can associate with work and revision and homework. And if possible, that can be separate from their bedrooms, the place that they usually associate with relaxing and sleeping. It could be a home office if you're lucky enough to have one of those, but it could simply be an area at the end of a table or a dining table where they consistently go to do work. Doing this can have several benefits. One is that it allows you discreetly to kind of monitor their working. That might be chivying them along, but it could also be encouraging them to take breaks when they need to. It also helps students get into a mindset for focused periods of study. If I'm in this area, then I'm going to be doing some work. And finally, and I think just as importantly, it allows them to switch off from work when they go away from that space and go back to their bedrooms. We know that that helps to reduce feelings of anxiety, and it promotes better sleep hygiene and sleep routines. And so having a conversation with your sons and daughters about where they work, where they associate with work, and the pros and cons of looking at those spaces, I think can be really valuable at the start of GCSE. It's important that spaces are well lit, ideally naturally, and well ventilated as well. And we know that that helps to aid concentration. It also reduces headaches from straining as well. And in terms of what you can do to help, we would really encourage you to have a dialogue with your sons and daughters about their work. That's something that I've been sort of stressing as we've gone through this evening. Not only talking about what tasks are coming up or what workload, although that's absolutely important, but also talking with them about their methods they're finding for work, when they find it's effective for them, where they're doing it, what kinds of technology they're drawing upon to help them with tasks. Be curious about their work. Show them that that's becoming a part of a routine at home, that they can have those conversations. That I then think helps to foster lines of communication with school as well. And I'd really encourage you to keep in touch with tutors in the first instance. That may be about workload or amount of time spent on tasks, but it can also be simply if you've got a question about how a student is approaching their study at home and other tips we can help to offer. Another thing, and I think particularly as we move further into phases of assessment at GCSE, is to ensure that if we want to issue rewards for your sons and daughters' work, that it's a reward for their effort rather than for their achievement. The best way that we can encourage students to develop habits is when we take an interest in the processes by which they work and reward them for that. So the time they've spent on something, but how they've used their time effectively, if they've managed to develop some resilience and discipline in the length of time that they can spend on tasks, whether they've been consistent in using those kind of habits of self-review, for example, whether they're getting good at sort of taking breaks away from the work and then coming back and working in a focused way. And then finally, in terms of help that can be offered at home, we really would advise that you continue to encourage your sons and daughters to read. There's a lot of research that suggests that students who engage in reading for pleasure reap the benefits across the curriculum in their study. I'm not just talking as an English teacher here, trying to sort of promote creative reading, but we find that reading of any kind continues to boost your sons and daughters' vocabulary and their ability to process and synthesize information, as well as their working memories. And that can have benefits across a whole range of subjects. And so the more that your sons and daughters continue to make a bit of time in their daily routines, whether that's on the commute to and from school, whether it's the final 5 or 10 minutes before they fall asleep at night, for some reading, the more they'll continue to benefit from that across their different subjects. I want to talk for a little bit now, just as I'm coming to a close, about the independent project as well. For 6 weeks in the autumn term, all Year 10 students participate in the IPC, which is the Independent Project Competition. It's something that's internal to the school, and it's an excellent opportunity for students to explore a topic of interest outside their GCSEs, as well as to develop their study and project management skills. And as part of that project, students can select from a list of topics. They can carry out research into that area and then produce a 1,000-word essay that requires them to analyse and evaluate the research that they've conducted. And we recognise that that's going to be a new experience for most students, and we're really keen to help them develop their skills and their self-reflection during the project. They'll have a chance to carry out a presentation where they discuss their findings and how the process went with their peers, and there will be prizes that will be used to help celebrate their curiosity and achievement there. Support with the project takes place during PSHE sessions, as well as in homework time, and students will also have the opportunity to reflect on their progress in discussion with tutors as well. I think that the project really forms an important step, not only in making the transition to GCSE, but also, as Dr. Linden was saying earlier, looking ahead to A-level. That's partly in terms of thinking about areas of interest that they might wish to explore further as they continue their academic studies, but in also becoming increasingly independent learners, which is critical, I think, to their success at A-level as well. Next slide, please.
I believe that would be my slide, Dr. Burton. Okay, good evening, everybody, parents and students at home. I hope you all know that I am Michaela Smith, Assistant Head Individuals for Years 7 to 10. So you've heard a lot about the academic side of the school, and it's only right that we talk about the support for the individual and for the parents as young people embark on this journey. So you'll be pleased to know that your tutor remains the same, and the strong relationship that you built up with him or her across the years will serve you well as your young person begins their GCSE study. Hopefully, you're also aware that within the last couple of years, we've introduced a middle management layer of senior tutors who can actively support and guide individuals who may be finding life, including studies, a little bit challenging, and perhaps they need that other person to help motivate them on the way. In addition to the tutor and the senior tutors and myself, there's Mr. Allison, Head of Year 10, who will be speaking, I imagine, in the question section, and Mrs. Nicholson, the Assistant Head of Year 10. They are always available. They're situated next to the Year 10 form rooms, and their door is literally always open. But what I am most excited about tonight is the opportunity to talk about our newly launched Wellbeing Centre. Hopefully you've all had a chance to come and have a look around. If not, I'm sure other opportunities will present themselves. So the Wellbeing Centre is, or should be, part of students' everyday life. It houses a range of staff, including our school nurse, Jane Potter, who is fabulous, and our newly appointed physical health lead, Bharat Samra, and our newly appointed mental health lead, Roanna Coles. Looking after the mind and body is really important, and I'm conscious that one thing we haven't talked about is the need to not only study hard but to play hard, to make sure that the young people are still fully involved in the co-curricular life of the school and are still physically active. If they want any advice about the body, so it might be related to sport injury, fitness for life, nutrition, excelling further in their chosen sport, they should book in to see Bharat. And if they are having any issues that they want to talk through, it could be friendships, relationships, managing the hectic life of the school, perhaps a little bit of anxiety, Roanna and her team are always there. I mention the word team because we also, I can see Mr. Spedding itching to move me on. We also have in our employ 2 art therapists and a drama therapist who are there to support your young people. Okay, Tutors at Time remains largely the same, but with an increasingly academic focus. So tutors will be well versed in knowing what your sons, daughters, our young people need in terms of target setting. They will be actively looking at their exercise books, their Google Classrooms. Dr. Burton's already talked about the significance of literacy, so we might give some time to reading or promoting reading. And of course, they will be working hand in hand with Dr. Burton and the subject staff in terms of enhancing students' study skills. The voice of the individual remains key to the school's success. And this can be heard in a variety of different ways, whether it's through a form council, year council, student council, or through some of the working groups that will be set up throughout the year. I know, for example, if we're talking about the academic side of life, that students are now spoken to regularly during departmental scrutinies by Mr. Duckett, who's not here tonight, but plays a very active role in the teaching and learning of the school. And of course, we do issue student surveys throughout the year. But I think I speak for everybody on the management team. Our doors are always open, so students don't have to wait for a formal opportunity to come and talk to us. We are there for them, and they should just walk through those doors if they want to.
I think that's
okay. Oh, Mr. Allison, I'm just going to talk about RSE if that's okay. Okay, I'll make it quick. I can see Mr. Allison is itching. I think the most important point to make is following the most recent inspection, we have reviewed our RSE curriculum, our policy, and we've got more of a focus on ensuring that students are aware of the progress they're making, the assessments that are being undertaken. So, for example, students can now see their assessment marks on their Google Classroom. They will have some longer pieces of work marked with comments. And we're just keen to sort of build upon everything that's been working well as we move forward. For parents, there should be a draft policy available next week. Alex Andrews, who's in charge of PSHE, will write to you about this. We'll then have a consultation period of about a week or two, and we really do want to hear from you. There's quite a few updates this time in terms of policy and the way that we do things, so we have given this significant thought. If you don't want to contact us directly, we will be keeping in touch with you through the MERL. So you have probably seen the infographics, and then Mr. Allison, as head of year, will be writing in the MERL about topics that are being studied alongside celebrating young people.
Is that my cue?
Well, it's my Hollywood smile.
Right, thank you, and thank you to my colleagues as well. I know I'm the last slot. I'll keep it reasonably brief. It is great to see over 100 parents in attendance. I can see the number on the top of the screen. Head of year, so I'm Mr. Allison, and I suppose really looking after your child on a day-to-day basis, hour by hour basis, really is one of the main functions. But really, it's that transition, certainly this first half term, the transition from year 9 to year 10, obviously can be daunting. We've seen about the GCSE. It's obviously monitored very well, and my door's always open. I have a big link to both pastoral, the side of the school, and the academic side of the school, and the senior tutors. So often that kind of knock on the door might be a question about an academic issue. And so obviously we can signpost them to the right people. It's also, for me, is to kind of develop the students through opportunities within the year group. So we're developing students morally, spiritually, and we're also promoting the school values in every opportunity we can, whether that's student-led assemblies, that's through the PSHE programme, and also things like the ambassador scheme, which is something that we launched quite a few years ago. It gives students a leadership opportunity. So that's also linked really, really well into this making a difference, which I know is one of the school's main focuses this year for individuals, promoting and helping them develop, make a difference. Is things like running clubs for younger students at lunchtimes, stopping students in the corridor, having a friendly chat and making sure their day's going well. So we try and promote that as much as we can. We promote the school voice, certainly the student voice, within the school, and certainly that's through the council and the year council and whole school council, and that's Mrs. Smith who runs that side of things as well. So I link very heavily there. I suppose really what I'd just like to say before we go away is obviously questions, either in the chat bar or through emails for myself. I am a big advocate of supporting success in year 10, and I do write nearly every article in the MERL is focused on that. So I think really the only final thing is students' well-being is a massive part of the head of year and everybody else in the school, and we obviously are looking after your child, and they're very, very safe. Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you, everybody. I think we're just about on the dot there for 45 minutes. We realise there's lots and lots of information shared with you there tonight, and hence we have recorded this if you wish to look back on it at a later date, either this week, next week, or in the months ahead. So please do, we've got time for about 5 minutes time for any questions that you may have. Hopefully not too many following the vast amount of information that we've given you. I can see that somebody's asking for a list of exam boards. We will send that list out with this recording. That always comes out at the start of the year. So that will come out with this recording, which will be out to you hopefully by the start of next week at the latest. Do we have any more questions for myself or my colleagues? Perfect. Okay, I think that's the shortest Q&A that I've done in the last. I spoke too soon. Can we get past papers online for each subject? And do you want to just take that one, Dr. Linton?
Yes, there are lots and lots of past papers available online, and your children's teachers will direct them to that. They will also be able to provide question packs on specific topics as well. So there'll be lots and lots of revision resources. It might be that full past papers are not appropriate for students to do early on in the GCSE course, as they won't have covered everything, but they will be able to move on to that. But in the meantime, if they want more questions, just, all teachers will be happy to provide. So please do just ask them to ask.
Dr. Burton, you want to take the social media one?
Yes, of course. There are one of the best ways we found to sort of help students manage their time on apps when they're working are actually some focus apps that can be used. There are two that immediately spring to mind that can help your sons or daughters sort of manage when they're using their device for work and when they're using it for sort of leisure time. The first one of those is called TimeStream. I'll put the little link in the chat now so that that's available for people. It essentially works as an online Pomodoro timer. It helps students set a period of time for which they're going to set aside for work, and it freezes their browsers so they continue to work just on their work for that time. The other one is called Pomo Focus as well, and that does a similar sort of job. There are new texts that come out doing this all the time. We've come across these sites because students themselves have used them for during their own revision and study, and have suggested to us that they've been beneficial for them. So those are just two that I'm particularly aware of right now. And again, it's worth sort of sharing those with your sons and daughters if they know that that's something they particularly need help with focusing on. So it's not about shutting out device use for social life at all. It's about helping to see how that can be managed in a way that helps them to focus on work when work needs to be done.
Thank you. I'll just say the one about the maths clinics and other clinics. There will definitely be many clinics happening across all subjects. They tend to be more towards the end of year 10 and year 11. And those clinics are then individually targeted. So the students who will benefit the most from those clinics are asked to come along by the heads of department or their teachers. And I suppose the first time that happens is following the year 10 exams, which will happen just after Easter. So whilst we have some subjects that are doing clinics at the moment, maths does clinics right from year 7. Others will tend to work through lesson time only at the moment, unless they start to see a pattern developing, and then we'll start to put clinics on. Dr. Linton, you want to just take that maximum grade one again, please, just to reinforce that one.
Yeah, no problem. So there is no maximum grade for the first half term, but in some subjects, students will not have covered enough complexity of work to be awarded the grade 9 or the grade 8. So particularly in maths and languages, it's really unlikely that a student would achieve a grade 8 or 9, but it might be that in other subjects, perhaps sciences that I can think of, it might be possible. So I think if you have any specific queries about your son or daughter's progress following interim grades, then you're very welcome to contact your tutor at that time, and they'll be able to explain. But you should see, as students progress through year 10, them reaching those higher grades, or they'll become available. I can also take the question about the sets until the end of year 11. So the option subjects where students have selected their options, so everything apart from English and maths, those sets are those groups are firm. They're not set by attainment. They are based on the option blocks that have been constructed. For English and maths, students are put into different attainment sets. They are not fixed. They can be adjusted through the year if we feel that the sets that they are in are not appropriate, and that will happen periodically through the year. And there is not a formal progress test for year 10 before October half term. You may have heard about those. That's just for the sixth form. So the year 10s, they might have a topic test in class before half term, and that will depend on the subject. So there will be periodic topic tests throughout year 10. The first sort of major formal assessment are those following the Easter break, the end of year 10 exams.
Thank you, Dr. Linton. Do you want to keep going?
Yeah, so topic tests, they will inform interim grades that students are awarded. The interim grade will be made up holistically of how the student is doing, both in assessments in class and how they are working in class. It may have a component of the homework. So it isn't a topic test is the entire grade, but clearly how they've done in an assessment in class will contribute to that. And in terms of the kind of the projection going through the year, that again, the teacher will look holistically at how the student is doing in all aspects of the study and then make a reasoned judgment from that information.
I think the only thing I would add to that, Dr. Linton, would be when we get to year 10 exams, subjects maybe like drama may have some components from their practical work that go towards their final mark in their end of year exams. But most of our exams in year 10 will just be, the grading will be based on those final exams just after Easter. Thank you. That looks like we are done for tonight. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us. It was a great turnout, as Mr. Allison said, from year 10. If you have any more questions, you can contact any of us on the screen tonight, or as Dr. Linton said, tutors are incredibly well informed and should be used as well as a point of contact. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you all at concerts, at sports fields, etc. Across the year. And good luck to your sons and daughters as they embark on their GCSE journey. Thank you. Thanks very much, team.
Thanks, Paul. See you tomorrow.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, bye, everybody.